Ladies and gentlemen, throughout the run of Dexter, there has been a lot of villains. Some of them are great, and some of them honestly just sucked. So in this video, we're going to be doing a no-nonsense tier list of the Dexter villains. All the main ones, there's a lot in there. Let me show you what I got here really quickly. Take a look at this. This is the tier list we're going to be running with. We have Arthur Mitchell, we have Brian Moser, Isaac Serco, George King, who is the Skinner, for those of you who didn't know his name. You have Travis Mitchell or whatever, I forget his name, Oliver Saxon, you have Miguel Prado, you have Lyla, Jordan Chase, and Kurt Caldwell. So all the biggest of the big bads. And this is the way the list breaks down. So you have S, and that's, your God tier list. That's the best of the best. Then you have A, it's pretty good. B is meh, all right. C is not the greatest, but not the worst ever. And then you have the typical D tier, but this is my not even the fart tier list because I like Ice Spice, okay? I actually don't like Ice Spice, but I thought that would be funny. I don't think it's that funny. Regardless, anyway, let's jump right in. And obviously, we gotta get one of the best out of the way. Arthur frickin' Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. Is it even up for discussion that this guy would be in anything else other than S tier? The Trinity Killer is the most compelling story, I think, in Dexter, period. Everything from it just being John Lithgow to begin with, to his interesting dynamic where you could tell the man has issues, clearly. You could tell he has things that have gone on since he was a kid that have impacted him, to essentially make him reenact the events that have happened in his life throughout the murders that he does all across the country through this facade that he has of going and doing things for the community, like building things. And I just love everything about this. He's hidden in plain sight. He's a great member of the community to begin with. People love him. People know him. But behind all of this, he is a absolute nut job. Obviously, that sounds a little bit like textbook, like what you hear about killers like John Wayne Gacy. I know that's a totally random one. Maybe he wasn't like an outstanding citizen. But like, he kind of blends into that mold of like your typical murderer in the real world. But the difference here is you get it all. You get this charisma from him that is just truly fascinating. And it's just so fun to watch because, yeah, the story is a little stereotypical of a murder, but the depth that they go to is just crazy. And then obviously what happens towards the end is nuts. It's also really interesting to see that he's an outstanding citizen in the public, but then behind closed doors, he is a horrible father and he does terrible things to his kids. It's just everything worked. And then it all came together in such a good way where essentially at the end, he has that one up on Dexter, even though he dies. That is such incredible storytelling, and it just works so well, and it goes without saying that the Trinity Killer is the top dog. But there might be one more top dog on this list, one singular one, and that's Brian Moser, the Ice Truck Killer. And I think he goes one step above Trinity. It's kind of interesting when you think about it. Have you ever heard people say that Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd is the best album of all time, but it's not the best Pink Floyd album? I don't know if you've heard that analogy. Like, you could go down the rabbit hole with that all you want, but that's kind of how I feel here. Like, out of villains, the Trinity Killer is the best killer. But for Dexter, Brian Moser, the Ice Truck Killer, is the best killer. If that makes any crazy sense. Like, it just fits the narrative so much better to be Dexter's brother, even though I think it's objectively true that Arthur Mitchell and John Lithgow just was outstanding and even better in the role. But something just worked in the formula of Dexter with Brian Moser that was just so great. That first season was so immaculate, specifically because of Brian Moser. And I'm glad we've gotten to see more of him in things like Original Sin, which I do promise my review is coming out for. Honestly, guys, really quickly on a quick side note, it's taken me a lot longer to finish this season. I know you guys say it's really good, but I'm bored. I'm not going to lie. That's just a quick side note. The reason I bring it up is I know he's in there too, and we get more exploration with him there, and I just love all of it. I think Brian Moser is an outstanding character. I really do. And I think he serves the entire plot of Dexter just so well and is monumental in the storytelling of the show. So yeah, okay. Arthur Mitchell, probably one of the best villains of all time. Like, he will go down in the history books of TV villains of all time. But for Dexter as a villain, Brian Moser is just the better of the two in that regard. Very hard to explain. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, comment a dolphin in the comments. I don't know, comment something like that. Regardless, those are the two S tiers. And then we have Isaac Serco. Isaac Serco is... well, I don't know if you could call him a villain per se, because he started out as the villain and then he slowly became, I guess, an ally to Dexter over time. So you could call him more of an antagonist than a villain, but I don't think he qualifies in any way, shape, or form as an S tier villain. He's a phenomenal character and I really like him. I don't think there's anywhere else I could put him other than A. I think he fits that description perfectly. I loved the character arc that this man had in season 7. And as a matter of fact, it was one of the reasons I loved season 7 so much, was because Isaac Serco did just such an incredible performance, and he went from this big ruthless bad guy. Of all the bads in the show, he was the most apparent bad because he's a mafia guy. That's how it is. People know him in society, blah, 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 all that stuff. But then you get to learn so much more about him. And the reason he was so angry to begin with was the fact that Dexter killed his lover. And that's a really interesting way to tell a story, especially in the way that they did, where over time, even though Isaac hates Dexter for what he did, he understands Dexter because he's a lot like him in a lot of ways, and they slowly work out their differences despite the animosity caused by, him losing a loved one. And it's just told in such a natural way that doesn't feel forced, that doesn't have any issues or complaints on my end. I just really enjoyed him as a character, not as a villain, as a character. Yes, technically a villain, sure, but just more of an antagonist turned somewhat ally, and I loved every minute of it. Next entry is easy. I didn't really care for this one. We got the Skinner. I'm going to go with a C tier there. I wouldn't say it's as low as a Not Even the Fart, but there wasn't really anything to him. You know what I mean? He was in a couple episodes. He was he was like a stereotypical background villain, if that makes any sense whatsoever. There wasn't really much there to say, so I'm going to move quickly past him because that's all I got. Up next, we have the great Travis Marshall. He's Not Even the Fart. Just joking. He was not great. He was the worst villain of the show. And it's not necessarily that Colin Hanks did a bad job with the role. It's just that the character fucking sucked. I couldn't stand this season because of the Doomsday Killer. More specifically, I couldn't stand it because of Geller, personally. I just thought that whole dynamic was super cringe and kind of made me want to just stop watching the show. I didn't though. So it's not really Colin Hanks. It's just everything that came with Colin Hanks' character. Just the whole Geller thing, then the whole Travis thing, and then the fact that these were very calculated, very well thought out murders, especially in the first part of season 6. But then immediately once the heat gets put on Travis, he just turns into a literal terrorist. That's it. He tries to bomb the homicide department. He tries to do a ton of other stuff in terms of Doomsday, and I get it. That was kind of the point, that he was doing the Doomsday killing and it was going to lead to a big event. But it just seemed like a flip of a switch where he went from a very calculated, even though I couldn't stand him, a very unique, interesting-ish character to literally just a terrorist, and it didn't make any sense. The way it was told sucked. I also just didn't like the performance. Again, not that Colin Hanks acted badly. I just didn't like the portrayal, the performance of the character himself. It didn't really work for me. It kind of felt like a Scooby-Doo villain, and I just wasn't a fan of it. It was the closest that this show gets to a Fear the Walking Dead character, if that makes any sense. And I'm just not for it. So we're going to leave it at that. He is Not Even the Fart. And we also got one more who is not even anywhere close to the fart. Oliver Saxon. True. Well, I mean, by doing that sound, I guess it's technically a fart, but he's not even any of that. I couldn't stand season 8, and I couldn't stand Oliver Saxon because I just didn't like the story he told. I didn't like where he delivered the finale of the show. It wasn't as much the brain surgeon storyline that I hated. It's just the baggage that came with him. There was no redeeming qualities. He was just annoying in an otherwise awful season of TV, between Evelyn Vogel being absolutely abysmal to her son being just a robotic like like, I don't, it was a terrible impression of him, but it just didn't work. Nothing that you gave for him worked. It wasn't fun. It wasn't enjoyable. And you fucking killed Deb. So fuck you for that, because it shouldn't have happened. And Oliver Saxon sucked. He wasn't even the fart. He was barely even a burp. Jesus Christ. Okay, now we have Miguel Prado. And I know I've ragged on season 3 a lot. I get that. And I don't want to say it's Miguel's fault, because it really isn't, but I didn't find this storyline fun. I didn't find it enjoyable, and I really do wholeheartedly think that's going to change on a second viewing, but it's like in part Miguel, but not. So this makes it really hard, because I actually really did like Miguel as a character. I was a big fan of him, and I liked him as a villain. He's not an S tier. I don't know if he's a B tier, but he's barely an A tier, if that makes any sense to me. I don't know that I want to stoop as low as a B, but I don't know that I want to stoop into A. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave him in B tier for now, and I may come back and change that. We will see. But they're just, I don't know. I loved that he had a good friendship with Dexter. I really enjoyed that. I thought it worked well, and I thought him learning the ropes through Dexter, but then slowly turning into a worse person, was a very interesting story to explore, all things considered, whether I enjoyed it or not. On paper, this was a really cool story. I just didn't love the execution, partly because of Miguel, not the actor. Again, I've defended all the actors here because they all did a phenomenal job, but the actor was totally fine. It wasn't his fault. It was just, it bored me. I don't know, but I did like Miguel a lot, so I'm really torn. That's what you get for Miguel for now. We may revisit him in a few minutes. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to scroll, but up next we have Lyla. And I fucking loved Lyla. I'm not going to lie. Lyla was my favorite. She is an S tier. Okay, Arthur Mitchell and Brian Moser are like the two greats. 100%. There's no dispute of that. So to put her in S tier may to some of you may be surprised by that. It's just, I personally loved her. I loved her character. I thought it was such an interesting story where she was this psychopath, just a crazy person, with a really interesting story where she was supposed to be the sponsor for Dexter, but then they had a whole affair. Then she became obsessed, and then she was the one to kill Dokes. Like, there's just so much there that was really interesting. And season 2 wouldn't have been probably my favorite season of Dexter if it wasn't for Lyla. I'm not even kidding. I thought she made the show because I thought she like made Dexter for me. Like, out of all the seasons, Lyla in particular was one of the elements to the show where I was like, damn, this is a great show. I just loved everything they gave. I loved honestly, as weird as this sounds, I liked their chemistry. They had like a very solid chemistry on screen that was just energetic and really fun to watch. And I think that really helped too. And even though she died and deserved it, I wish she stayed around longer because of that. Because, yeah, you have other characters in there that you could say, like Hannah McKay. They had an electric chemistry for sure, but there isn't anything that came close to the on-screen chemistry that Lyla and Dexter had, and it worked so well for the story. All things considered, I love Hannah McKay more than I do Lyla, but I do think as far as villains goes and story arcs, Lyla is just outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. I know that might also be a little controversial for some of you. Now we have two interesting ones here. We have Jordan Chase. I don't think he's an A. I don't know that he's a C. He's not a B though. I'm gonna put him in C, but at the top of C. It's a little crazy probably to put him in the same category as the Skinner, because I thought the Skinner was just a very just like one note nothing character. Jordan Chase was more than that, and he was actually a really big element to see. He was the biggest element to season 5. And there was a lot of really interesting things to explore there with him that I applaud. I thought they were good. I just thought he fell, I should say, very short as a villain. I didn't think there was anything that really caught my eye about, like it was an interesting story, but I would never say he had a similar spark to even someone like Miguel did. Obviously not Isaac or any of the S tiers or anything like that, but he wasn't as bad as like a George, definitely not anything like Travis or freaking Oliver Saxon, but he's just not good, not bad. He's like basically meh, but a little worse, in my opinion. That's how I feel about him. You could definitely let me know how you feel in the comments about that one. But then lastly, we have Kurt Caldwell. And I fucking loved Kurt Caldwell. I'm not going to lie. He's going in my S tier. I had to think about it for a second. Not S tier, Jesus, did I say that? He's going in my A tier. He would never be an S tier character, but he is close. He is a very interesting character. In a lot of ways, they tried to do something a little similar between him and the Trinity Killer, where the Trinity Killer was like a well-known person in the community. They did the same sort of thing for Kurt. They made him a very just well-known person in the community that everyone talked about, everyone knew, because he owned all the businesses. He did a lot of like charity work and things like that. But then behind the scenes, he was, I think, the scariest killer out of all the Dexter ones, just because of his like museum of women down there in the, in the bunker or whatever you call it. It was so fascinating, and I think part of the reason I like him so much was because of that whole museum thing. It was just so sick and twisted, and also the way he killed people was really interesting and scary, and it just worked so well for the environment that it was in the town that they were in. Just with the winter, with the snow, the isolation, and him being a larger burly man with, the face mask on, using a sniper with a laser beam, or, whatever, laser point or whatever you call it, and just killing them the way he did was just terrifying. And what he did to them was terrifying, but he put on this crazy facade. I loved it. I thought he was a great villain. I really did. It was fun. Yeah, he didn't have some of the depth that maybe Miguel did, for sure. Like, I would argue Miguel, character-wise, is probably a slightly better character than Kurt. But as far as villains go, remember, that's what this video is about. It's a villains tier list. I definitely think Kurt takes the cake, for sure. I'm a huge fan of Kurt. Did I say Kirk? I'm a huge fan of Kurt, and I'm a huge fan of all the villains. To be frank, even the ones that are not even the fart, I still enjoyed watching, because I think Dexter was that good of a show. And obviously there's going to be shit tier ones in a season, in a show with 9 seasons, basically. So yeah, you have to put some in the very bottom. But I still think even the worst of the worst was more interesting than a lot of shows out there. That's how I feel about Dexter. I think it's just a very good, very solid show. And I think it's the villains that really do it for me. So again, in S, we have Brian Moser, Arthur Mitchell, and we have Lyla. In A, we have Isaac, we have Kurt. In B, we have Miguel. In C, we have Jordan Chase, and we have the Skinner, George King. Then in Not Even the Fart, we have Travis and Oliver Saxon. That's the list, guys. I'm going to flip back to the camera here. That's the list. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I really do. I know I've been doing a lot of Dexter lately. Just want to get a couple messages out there. I know I've been doing a lot of Dexter lately, and I know a lot of you guys here are here for the Walking Dead stuff and all that, and I promise I'll do more of it for sure. It's not going anywhere. It's just I got really fixated on Dexter lately, so I've been pumping out all the videos because I binged it really quick, and I want to make sure we get in time for Resurrection and all of that stuff. So thank you so much for the support. I also want to quickly say we are very close to hitting my lifelong dream of 10,000 subscribers. We're literally 100,000 subscribers. I mean, 100,000. We're literally 100 subscribers away at this point. And this is something I've wanted my whole life. I've always wanted to be a YouTuber. And it's so weird. You put 2 years of work into it and you do it all the time and you put your head down to it. Eventually, one day you're going to realize it's like working. And it feels like it is for the first time in my life, and it's one of the best feelings ever. So thank you guys. Seriously, it means the world. And yeah, I'll see you soon. I'll see you for a Original Sin review. I'm taking a little bit longer with it just because I think it's a little boring. I'm not really loving it yet. So yeah, it's coming, but it's going to take a little longer than I thought. I know I promised this week. I'm still going to try, but I'm not really that close to finishing, and it's taking me longer to finish. So we'll see. It'll probably be my next video. Maybe I'll have one more or two. I'm rambling, but that's the list. Hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments how you felt, what your tier list of these characters are. And with all that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.